we need to be clear that this remains a defensive war, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe more broadly.
Yeah. President Macron, speaking from the town of Irpin, denounced Russian attacks on Ukraine as barbaric. Let's talk to Susie Dennison, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council of Foreign Relations. Susie, good evening to you.
Thank you for having me. Hi there.
Hi there. So, as we say there, it is a remarkable event, isn't it, to see these three European leaders together alongside President Zelensky in the Ukrainian capital, a kind of gathering, a picture reminiscent of World War II in some ways.
Yes, and I think it is perhaps even more because at least two of these leaders, Macron and Scholz, both indicated that they wouldn't go to Kiev until there was something substantive to discuss. So today was not supposed to be only about the optics, but really about getting into the detail of what the European offer to Ukraine is going to be going forward.
So let's talk about one of the main points there, then in this significant discussion, the idea of a future membership of the European Union for Ukraine. How do you read that prospect in the light of this meeting, and also in the light of the obstacles in the way of that?
I mean, I think what European governments are united around is the idea that they want to give Ukraine a European perspective. And I think that the signal that was sent today by the three leaders of Europe's three largest member states, that they wanted that signal next week at the European Council to be that Ukraine would have candidate status, is a very strong signal, because that's the beginning of the consensus that's going to be needed in the European Council around this. I think the challenges are more around the sort of the detail of what are the conditions attached to that candidate status, because if we understand what Russia is doing in Ukraine as an attack not only on Ukraine but on the international rules-based order, this is a really bad time for the European Union to be breaking its own rules about what needs to be achieved before membership can be given. And this is the concern of some of the more sceptical EU member state governments regarding Ukraine membership. But at a public level, we've been doing opinion polling at ECFR over recent weeks. And in a poll that we conducted in 10 member states, we found that 57% of Europeans, so a clear majority, of those surveyed were in favour of Ukraine membership. So I think that this is a place that the EU wants to get to. The challenge is how.
Yeah, and when. I mean, there is a good wellspring of public sympathy in large parts of Europe to see Ukraine as an EU member. But when? I mean, you have at the moment, well, we have a war in Ukraine, and into the future, very considerably far into the future, you've got the prospect of instability, a threat from Russia. These are conditions that mitigate against membership, aren't they, or joining?
Well, I think that Zelensky and other members of the Ukrainian government have been clear that they understand very well that even once candidate status has been given, it will take time to work through the criterion, that they're committed to going through that process rigorously. I think from their point of view, what they're looking for is a very clear signal to Russia and any other potential aggressor that the EU sees Ukraine as part of their sphere of responsibility, if you like. Yeah. You know, we're seeing a lot of European states at the moment rethinking their security architecture. We've had Sweden and Finland looking to apply for NATO membership now, which is reversing very long-standing positions. So I think that Ukraine's position and that of Moldova, Georgia, and other neighbours around is in that security perspective. Yeah. They're committed to putting the work in, but they want the very clear signal to Russia that it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, maintaining an alliance, a unity along a breadth of nations in Europe and the West of this kind, it was never going to be easy, but there is still a measure of unity there. But what about the object of the fighting? When Emmanuel Macron says Ukraine must win, which is what he's saying now, that means different things to different people, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think going back to this public opinion survey that I was referring to that we commissioned, there is very clear unity around Russia's responsibility for the war. 3/4 of Europeans hold Russia solely responsible for what is happening. But they're more divided on how and when to end the war, on the question of whether you should try to achieve peace as quickly as possible, even if that may mean some kind of concession in terms of territory to Russia, or whether you should push to achieve justice. And I think this is a cleavage which policymakers need to be live to, because in order to maintain European consensus around an ongoing tough response, economic sanctions, military aid, and so on, which let's be realistic, is going to continue to cost Europeans over the coming months and years, in order to maintain the consensus around that, there is a need for a messaging around why we're doing that and what we're aiming at, which appeals to both those who desperately want peace and those who feel that justice is necessary. And I think that consensus can be found around characterizing this war as an ongoing threat to Europeans, that we need to be clear that that this remains a defensive war, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe more broadly.
Yeah.
And that our continued engagement with it is necessary.
There are economic pressures. There are pressures of internal divisions of public opinion, and political pressures inside the component parts of the European alliance alone. And with all of that in mind, how confident are you that the alliance behind Ukraine will hold strong for very much longer?
Well, I think that the series of summit meetings that are coming up, not only at European level, but G7, NATO level at the end of this month, will be absolutely crucial. I'm not saying that they're a one-off moment, but I think that as we move into the autumn, with continuing rises in energy prices, with continual costs being felt by households and businesses within Europe and the West, then the consensus around continuing those measures will become tougher to hold. So I think it's really incumbent on leaders to seize this moment and to ramp up the pressure on Russia at this point, to the point at which, as far as we can, in order to ensure that we face the autumn with those measures already in place.